Hi, good morning, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown. And I was lying in my bed this morning, turned over to my phone, as we shouldn't do when we're sleeping, but wake up and look at your news. And I was thrilled. Finally, they have arrested Sherri Papini for her hoax of her kidnapping. This happened way back in 2016, and I'm very excited because I immediately came out in 2016 and said, there's something wrong with this picture. I do not believe this is a hoax. I believe she is exhibiting Munchausen syndrome and that she faked this whole thing for attention. And some people were kind of upset with me for saying that because people don't like to believe that women do things like this, that she would put herself through the ordeal she put herself through and scare her husband and her children and the entire community. There was even an FBI profiler who came out and said, no, 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 this is an abduction. And I stuck to my guns on this one because I'm very familiar with Munchausen syndrome. And below, what you'll be able to see below, I have two articles I wrote back in 2016 about the case, detailing why I believe this was a hoax and not a real live abduction. And also recently I did a show on YouTube called The Bizarre Case of Sherri Papini, and I detailed the entire case and a lot of issues about Munchausen syndrome. So that's also linked below. So go there and check that one out. I think you'll find it very, very interesting and a lot more information there than I'm going to give you here. But let me tell you what came out in the news this morning. It says in the headline, Sherri Papini made up story of 2016 abduction in California, officials say. Now, listen to this. This is just fascinating. Sherri Papini, the California mother who disappeared for weeks in 2016 and claimed she'd been kidnapped at gunpoint, made up the story and had been staying with an ex-boyfriend. There was this interesting, when they did the DNA, she had said she was kidnapped by two Hispanic females and never said there were any men around. But interesting, they found DNA from a male. Now we know whose it was. It shows she had been staying with an ex-boyfriend. Papini, now 39, was arrested for allegedly, okay, well, she hasn't gone to court yet, so that is true. Allegedly lying to investigators in 2020 when presented with evidence the kidnapping was faked and of defrauding California out of more than $30,000 in victim assistance money. And this is one of the reasons I get so upset about false reporting, because it takes tremendous amount of manpower away that could be used on real cases. It uses a lot of money that could be used on real cases. And it also puts a bad name on real victims as well. And, if enough people do false reporting, then the real victims, when they come in and tell a similar story, the police go, really? Maybe she's making it up. And I always believe false reporting should be dealt a harsh penalty. I absolutely do. And most of the time it's just a little, slap on the wrist and go on. I don't believe that should be so. I believe it should be labeled a fraud and given a high penalty. Prison. Definitely should get prison. Anyway, so what happened Papini disappeared in Northern California in 2016, and it set off a nationwide search involving the FBI. 3 weeks later, she was found along Interstate 5 in rural Yolo County with a chain around her waist and a, quote, brand on her shoulder, which she said was inflicted by her captors. Ultimately, the investigation revealed there was no kidnapping. All right, countless hours were spent not only in a search for her, but for the purported abductors. Papini faces charges of making false statements to law enforcement and engaging in mail fraud. Papini is in custody Thursday, and let's see what else we have to say here. This is what happened on November 2nd of 2016. She was reported missing after she failed to pick up her two children at daycare. She had last been seen jogging in her neighborhood, and her cell phone with earbuds was found at an intersection. And then, on November 24th, she was found on I-5 with injuries that the authorities now say are self-inflicted. All right. She had originally told the investigators that two Hispanic women with a handgun kept her captive. And they looked for these people and then didn't come up with these people because she had a very vague description. And one of the reasons that it was so fascinating to me right on and why it was so suspicious was that the purpose of being kidnapped by two women was like, why would they kidnap her? What would be the reason for that? Some people thought they would, maybe for the drug trade. And like, there was no evidence she was in the drug trade. Some people thought it was for the sex trade. And I'm like, she's pretty, but she's not like 18 years old. She's in her 30s. This is not who you kidnap. And you don't need to kidnap a blonde woman off the streets and start a huge police investigation. This is not a smart thing. There's a lot of women out there who will just go into the sex trade who have the same blonde hair and they're 18 or 16, So that made no sense to me. Also, there were things in her past that just popped out immediately to me. One thing was that, look at this picture. You see the bandana? She claimed that the women were wearing bandanas. And this was from Halloween. And a lot of things that people do when they're trying to make up a story is remember something like that just happened, something in their brain. Bandana. And also, back in her history, this was a huge red flag for me. Her mother had once called the sheriff and said, "My daughter has inflicted injuries upon herself and she's blaming us." That is huge, because that is a sign of Munchausen syndrome, even way back when. And so now we have what looks like another example of a Munchausen syndrome person inflicting injuries on themselves and claiming somebody else did it to gain attention. And so right from the get-go, I said, I don't believe this is, I do not believe this is a kidnapping. And it was interesting. Her husband spent a lot of time saying she was a perfect mother, she was a perfect wife, she was perfect this, she was perfect that. And sometimes what Munchausen's people try to do, and by the way, what is Munchausen's? Munchausen's is simply, it's not really a psychological condition. It's a behavior. A person who exhibits Munchausen's is actually a psychopath. It is often a female psychopath. So there's Munchausen syndrome, where a female psychopath will harm herself or claim people did things to her, like she's been raped when she hasn't, to gain attention. That's how she gets her thrills. And if it's Munchausen syndrome by proxy, she will harm her children or claim her children have some kind of diseases or something to gain attention. It's psychopathy, but the behavior is called Munchausen syndrome or Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And he is what I consider the perfect mate for a Munchausen syndrome lady. And I usually call them dolts. And the reason I do that is because as long as his needs are met, he's willing or unable to see what his wife is. She can do whatever she does, and as long as his needs are met, he doesn't see what she's doing, that she's manipulative and that she lies and that all of these things go on. He just wants his life to be the way it is. She's being kind to him. And so, unless she turns on him and says he did something to her. But a lot of times I've seen with the mates of women who exhibit Munchausen syndrome, you got a guy who's like, "Oh, I think she was great," like the type of guy whose wife kills all their children and he thinks she was a wonderful wife and mother. You're like, you didn't notice? But that's the way it works sometimes. So anyway, let me tell you the rest of the story. So, in 2020, DNA was found on Papini's clothes that was put in a database and routinely checked, ultimately led the investigators to her ex-boyfriend. That ex-boyfriend told investigators that Papini asked him for help and needed to get away, that he agreed to drive to pick her up in Redding, and that she stayed at his home in Costa Mesa in the Los Angeles area the whole time. Okay. The ex said he didn't know what the final plan was, dolt number 2, or if they'd get back together. Papini asked him to brand her at one point, which he did. I have to laugh here, I'm sorry. I'm reading this article, and they really need to do a spell check on this because they didn't have Papini, they put Panini. A panini. She's a sandwich now. Oh, that's funny. Panini. Panini asked. Now, Papini, guys, do your spell checks. Oh, that's funny. I'm going to now laugh through the whole rest of the show. Papini asked him to brand her at one point, which he did with a wood-burning tool. That's a great guy. And eventually she asked to be driven back to Northern California. And investigators said the ex-boyfriend's story was corroborated with car rental receipts and phone records, and the ex-boyfriend knew details not known to the public. The ex-boyfriend told investigators he initially thought he was just helping a friend. But after seeing the news about the later kidnapping claims, he got worried. He got so worried he didn't call in and stop this whole process. He should be arrested too. I hope he's going to be arrested. He decided not to make any calls, but assumed if the truth was discovered, police would come to him and he would cooperate. Arrest this guy. He is a co-conspirator. That's unbelievable. But they said no charges are against anyone else in the case were announced Thursday. Well, one can hope for Friday, which is today. In August of 2020, investigators interviewed Papini again, and she repeated parts of her story about women with a gun, and when confronted, she denied she stayed with her ex. So, there we have it. Finally, the proof is here. She was not abducted. This was a hoax from the beginning, a fraud, a false police report, and she needs to be in prison to stop this kind of thing in the future, because it is highly damaging to victims and to the community and to all the money they spend and all the manpower they waste. So I want you to look below. I have the link to the YouTube video I did, which is a 2-hour video, and I discuss a lot about Munchausen syndrome and the case, all the issues in the case. Also, I have two links to articles I did on my blog back in 2000, way back in 2016, which you can also read. And there's one more link I have there to an article I did on Munchausen syndrome. And I've had a lot of experience with Munchausen syndrome people, so that's why I feel like I'm rather an expert on it. And I see it more clearly sometimes than people who haven't really dealt with it. And interestingly enough, doctors and hospitals and nurses often don't recognize people who are exhibiting Munchausens, and it could cause a lot of damage to children, to little infant babies, because often they are the victims of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Also, sometimes the police don't recognize it, and many times the public doesn't recognize it either and can't accept that somebody would do this to themselves and lie like this and carry off this kind of a fraud. But this is psychopathy. That's what Munchausen syndrome is. It's psychopathy. It's just a behavior of psychopathy that tends to be a female behavior, because they tend to get their power and control through attention to themselves, not so much, like a serial killer running out and killing people and getting their thrills through violence. This is more like, hey, look what happened to me. It's more of a female trait. So anyway, I was again very happy this morning that they finally brought this to an end, and she's had 6 years extra of freedom, lucky her, and maybe it was good for her kids. That's all I can say. And I really feel sorry for the family in the sense that it's horrible to find out that this was a big fat lie after all that time, and I do have some sympathy for them. So, at any rate, that is it for today. If you've never been to my channel before, please do subscribe, like, and there's Patreon links below if you'd like to become involved more in the channel and the community. So thank you very much, and hooray for the police for finally bringing this to a close, and good luck to the prosecution. Hope it goes well. Bye.